Hello and welcome back. In this video, we'll be learning values and data types. A value is a representation of data used in a program. Now we know all about data, right? We know computer has to do with data, processing it, and giving out outputs. How you use data in a program, the way you the form that you show it in your program is actually a value. We have various types of value and can be used for one or more reasons in your program, and it is important that you use the right value for anything you're trying to achieve. Really, just think about providing the wrong data for something else. It will be misleading and could lead to errors. Now, every value in the program has a data type. So, while values are there, they represent data, but there's actually a type of data for each value. So, what are these data types? A data type is a classification of data. That's simple, really. Just like you say we have classes of food. You say we have proteins, we have carbohydrates, and each of them have their own function and what they do in the body, right? Same way, we have classes of data, and each value can use either of these classes. Data types determine how a program would make use of data. Coming back to the example using food, when you take protein and you take carbohydrates, the reaction within your body will be different. The type of enzymes that will get released will be different because each requires a specific operation in the body. Now, for data types, it's sort of the same thing. When you use a certain data type, the kind of operations that your program can perform is different than when you use a different kind. And that's why you'd see when we get more into writing code that the type of data that you use is really important, because if you use the wrong data, you might either have a program that doesn't work, or you might need to do some extra logic which doesn't really make sense when you could have simply used the right data type. From my explanation, it sounds like data types are pretty important. So it's important for us to know the types of data types, so you know which exist and how you can use them, what to use them for. I will be talking about some of the basic ones. And number one is one of my favorite data type, which is strings. Okay, a string is just simply text. Anything actually goes in a string, any text at all, characters, numbers, in fact, and special characters. So, for I've given two examples here. One is hello, and the second is John Doe. But you would notice something. I didn't just write hello; I put it within quotes. This is actually the format for writing a string. If you should just write hello, your program or your compiler wouldn't recognize that you are trying to create a string. It will try to define it as something else. So it is really important. I see this mistake where people forget a lot of times, especially when you're just starting up, to put quotes on their string. So just take it this way. Anytime you're writing a string, put a quotes. Okay, regardless of what it is, put a quote. And JavaScript accepts both double quote and single quotes. Some programming languages don't, so I just use double quotes here. Next is numbers, and if you did maths, whether you loved it or hated it, number, it should look very familiar to you, which is just any whole number. 20 minus 130, 13,900, 4 million, any number that goes as the number data type. Surprise, surprise. And in some cases, numbers are actually known as integer. So integer, number, sometimes interchangeable, sometimes slightly different, but they are overall, you have whole numbers like this. Next, we have floats, and floats are just decimal numbers. 23.98 minus 1.03, 40,000.67. Anything that has to do with the decimal points and gives you a decimal number is actually a float. And in some cases, we also know float as double. They can be used interchangeably sometimes. Sometimes the difference is just memory spaces, but they just both refer to decimal numbers. Next is another of my favorite data types, and which is the Boolean. And Boolean doesn't have a range of values, it just has two values. It's either it's true or it's false. So Booleans are kind of like straightforward, right? True or false. And those are the valid values that it can take. Notice there is no quote on the true or the false. It is just true, plainly true, or plainly false. I would like to mention that other data types exist. These are some of the basic ones, but as we progress, you would see that there are different ways you can represent data. There are different kind of values that you can have, but these are ones that you almost cannot avoid, right? Because they are the basic ones that make up even most of the other ones that we will see. I'm back in our editor and showing my editor by the side and the browser by the other side. Let's us see what a value will look like in our code. Now this still has the previous code, so I will just get rid of this. Okay, so what is a value? Now we looked at 4 of them, and to write them out in a program, well, you just use the exact same way I showed you in the slides. A string is any value, for instance, happy. Okay, because you're happy that you're writing code. Okay, happy, but for it to be a string, it has to be within quotes. Remember, double quotes or single quotes will work in JavaScript. All right, so notice this: a quote, the text that you want to write, and you close the quote. That makes a string. So this is a string, and again, a string can contain anything. Okay. So you can have numbers in here and special characters. It's still a valid string, provided you start with a quote and you end with another quote. Okay, but we can't actually run this program. Why? Remember in the previous videos, we talked about following the rules of programming. And you have to follow the right syntax and the structure for your program to run. So for us to be able to see what we've written, we have to write the right logical expression, and we've already done this before. Let's just use our documents.write. Okay, so documents.write helps us to see stuff on our browser. So document.write, open and close bracket, have a semicolon there, and in here you can put any valid value. Okay, so in the bracket you can put any valid value. I do hope you're coding along though. Okay, so what do I want to put in here? It's my happy 2002 semicolon string. Okay, so I would save this, get to my browser and refresh, and look at that. We have our string here, happy 2002 semicolon. Our string is displayed exactly as we wrote it in the code to be printed out. So that's a string. The next is a number. Now numbers do not need quotes. Okay, you just write them and it can be any number you like. So I will do a document.write again, and in here we can write any number we want. So 23, 234 for instance. Okay, save this and refresh. Look at that, we're having our numbers there. For the double, you just put your decimal number. Notice no quote because it's a number, right? If we refresh, we have that there. Okay, so notice I'm trying to repeat this a lot of times because it's actually very common to see, so that you don't make the same mistake. When you're writing a string, you use quotes. Okay, once you put quotes, it becomes a string. If I should put this within quotes, it is no longer a number, it becomes a string. Finally, let me just write this as float. Remember, I'm using comments here from the previous video. You write a comment using 2 slashes, and the computer will not, the compiler will not try to execute that line. So document.write, let's have false. Okay, so this is a boolean because booleans are what? True or false. No quotes, the computer recognizes that this is a boolean. Refresh, and sure, I can see false right there. So this is how you write values in your code. You just make sure you have the right structure for the value. For instance, a string should be inside quotes. I'm saying it again. And your numbers can just be any digits without decimal points for floats, for integers, and with a decimal point for floats. And your boolean can either be false or it can be true, and you can use that value anywhere. In this case, I'm using it with document.write, but you can use it in other forms.